What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I'm sitting down here with Sterling Cooley. So this is something that we've talked about a lot on this show before, man. We're going to dive right into it. I know that you are an expert in the vagus nerve. This is something that we talked about before. I think a couple years ago, we did an episode of my other podcast, Beyond Homo Sapien. And dude, it's one of the most popular episodes of the show. Like, so many people have reached out to me and said that that episode was super valuable to them. So I was like, man, we got to get you back over here. And I didn't actually know that you had a martial arts background. So before we dive into talking about the vagus nerve, I just want to hear just like the same question that I ask everyone, whether they're a UFC fighter, ADCC champion, a white belt. So what is jiu-jitsu? What has the martial arts done for you and your mental health since you started?
Well, it's great to be on, Paul, and thanks for having me. I really did enjoy our conversation. That was back in 2019 when I was working in a lab near Stanford in California, and so that was a great time. And a lot has happened since then in my field in my trajectory. Still vagus nerve related, but to get to your first question, it's a great question. Is what does martial arts mean to me, or what does jujitsu mean to me? I can't say I fought in the UFC by any means, right? But I am a white belt. I would say because of my travel schedule, I haven't really been able to maintain enough time at a one single dojo, but I have certainly done jujitsu since I believe about 2013, no, 2012. And that's when I started jujitsu. I think on the recommendation of like Joe Rogan, Sam Harris, when I took up like meditation. So I think it kind of sits in the same realm for me. Is it's sort of for me as a way of processing things through the body. I remember Sam Harris, whatever you think of the guy today, but back then he was cooler. I'm not a big fan these days, but whatever. uh he talked about it as like it's like drowning and trying to swim with another person, and it's constantly being drowned and trying to learn the mechanism of doing that. And it's really just being humbled continuously by a brown belt or a black belt. And then it's a great way to do cardio, to get strength training in. Honestly, I love jujitsu. It's one of the best sports ever, to be
Yeah,
honest.
man.
So yeah.
It's super centering. I think that's what you're
Yeah.
speaking to. Like, it grounds you right in reality in a very
Yeah.
interesting way. And
Yes.
man, that's powerful. So I want to dive right into it, man. I know that we don't have too long today. I want to hear about the vagus nerve. And let's just start here. Let's say that there's someone listening who's literally never heard of this before, and they're like, what are these guys talking about?
Mhm.
Some spot in Vegas off the strip? Like, a lot of people still have never even heard about this, and it's one of the most important parts of the human body. So yeah, could you give us like a dummy's guide to the vagus nerve system?
Yeah, well, I'm I'm a I'm the best and the worst person to ask that question, because if you met me 3 years ago, 4 years ago when we spoke, I could give you a very simplified answer about the vagus nerve, spelled VAGUS, not like VEGAS like Las Vegas. But similar root is it means the wanderer. That's what Las Vegas, the vagabond, essentially. So vagus nerve is a nerve. It's the longest nerve in your body. It's the most important nerve in your entire body. It regulates your heart rate, your digestion, your mood, your emotions. If you feel hungry, if you feel full, if you feel depressed or anxious, usually there's an indication going on with your vagus nerve. You want good vagus nerve activity, and you want to avoid things that harm your vagus nerve. There's a lot of things that harm your vagus nerve. There's a lot of people probably who are watching who have gotten into tracking their biometrics, like the Aura ring for sleep tracking, and they wake up to see an HRV number. That's an important number for the vagus nerve. There's also the Whoop band, which people are using a lot now for sports. That also tracks the number HRV. HRV stands for heart rate variability. So as far as what's applicable for most people is just getting some way to track that number. Even Apple Watches, which is what I use, can track your heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is the way that a system or a computer or an algorithm can calculate the balance between your autonomic system. You have your sympathetic fight or flight. When you're playing jujitsu, You're like in sympathetic. You are ready to dominate another human being, to choke them out with their gi. That's my power move, right? Usually is because I have such long arms, I'm able to reach across and just choke someone out, which is, sorry, I want to get my camera back in focus, but here, sorry. A little too animated for the camera, but you are in pure sympathetic. You are ready to, like, you are fighting. But once that session ends and you start taking that breath and you're at the side and you're just like, you got to breathe, you got to take those slower breaths. Your body needs to incorporate the vagus nerve parasympathetic system. And that's, if you do Wim Hof breathing, big rebalancing your system. So you, like, we see people white knuckling it all the time. They're just like ready to road rage someone in a second. And that's a sympathetic state. Parasympathetic, it's a little confusing. I wish there was a better nomenclature for it, but parasympathetic is essentially your vagus nerve that calms you down, lets you relax, lets you be more social, like get along with people, to eat delicious food, to digest it, to sleep well, to dream, to just be creative. I mean, everything that you want in your best life is just beyond the vagus nerve. Like it is there. So for me, it's really important. And it literally started, my introduction to it was completely by accident. I was working in Vegas. Well, I actually was working in brain stimulation with ultrasound. So taking ultrasound systems, like $20,000 systems, putting them right on the temple and stimulating the actual orbital prefrontal cortex to change mind, like crazy shit. This is like MK Ultra kind of shit, right? Paid work. This is my career. I just happened to be measuring my HRV and said, ooh, number go up, number go down. And I was like, well, if I stimulate my vagus nerve, I can control that. So I did. I put ultrasound right on my neck, on my vagus nerve, intentionally to regulate that number. And then I started doing Wim Hof breathing. And so I did the full, I mean, I was going full out, you can hear my breath changing. And then I did the exhale. I held that out for, I think at that time, getting up to about 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes of pure, no oxygenation. Once I was like, I felt my body like starving of oxygen. I took that big breath in. I went, still stimulating. It's like a pulsing. It's like a zzz sound. And then I went like this. You squeeze the Valsalva squeeze. You're just pushing everything. Wim Hof would be like, get into your physiology, and you're pushing up all that blood in your head. And I had I know what Wim Hof breathing does normally, right? It's like you can have almost a spiritual effect, kind of like when you're doing a deadlift and you almost black out and pass out. It's right on that edge of like loss of consciousness. Not always a bad thing. I can have some pretty profound states. Have you ever had that? Where you just have like your brain almost just is like, oh my God, like, you're out of body, out of mind. So while stimulating at the same time, because that loss of consciousness is also an effect of vagus nerve function normally, I was just doing 10x of what I should have done. So I had that blackout experience. I was laying down, and then I had literally an out of body experience, what someone would consider an astral projection into a big white room. Like my eyes felt open. I was conscious. I was lucid as hell, not blacked out. And then I projected even further into what looked like Central Park in New York City. Could hear everything, see crystal clear, vivid detail, hear conversations all around me. And I didn't even know what the hell was going on. I forgot that I was even laying, down in my home up on an island in Washington. And then that lasted for what seemed like an eternity. Then I came back into my body. And I could hear like my subconscious mind being like, if like Tony Robbins could be in your mind being like, you have so much potential. You can do this. You got to get off your ass. You got to do so much more with your life. And it was just like that level of like subconscious speaking, that mindset that you desire. It was just naturally there in my ear, like yelling at me almost. And I was just like, coming back to, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, I thought I almost killed myself. And so that was in 2017. And that literally was like my wake up call. That was my spiritual awakening, completely by accident. Totally, probably I'm the uniquest person to be able to have done that because I had access to ultrasound stimulation, clinical research technology, and I'm a diehard Wim Hofer. and I have a, lake in my backyard with ice on it. So I love jumping in that up here in the Pacific Northwest. So anyway, that for me was my evidence that there's something to this nerve that has to be explored. So what I know about it today, we have an event coming up in February. I'll share a link for it later. It's called Unleash the Vagus Within, and it's a 3-day event. If you don't mind me promoting it, but if you guys really want to like learn and get these exercises, we are doing that event in February. So would certainly invite people, but I'm the worst person to ask from a beginner standpoint. What is the vagus nerve? Because it's so much more than just a nerve. So anyway, I hope that makes sense as
No,
far
it
as
does, man. It does. And I love how you just shared like the most profound spiritual experience of your life. And then the first thing you said after that was anyway. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah,
yeah,
so dude, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, first of all.
yeah.
But dude, that's powerful. So I want to get into this a little bit. I mean, you shared a couple tactics. You shared, the
Mm-hmm.
Wim Hof, you shared jumping in the cold water.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say there's someone listening to this, or me, honestly, I'm super
Mm-hmm.
interested in this stuff too. What are a few other things people can do, like tactically, to kind of activate this and experience some of these benefits that you're describing?
Mm. There are lots of ways. So are you familiar with like I'm a big fan of Scott Adams' book, How to Fail at Nearly Everything and Still Win Big. Very popular book these days. Are you familiar with
I
that?
haven't. No, I haven't read it. I'll have to check it
I
out.
would, and maybe watching, go get that book. Some people are like, yes, he's mentioning it. So he talks about this idea of systems versus goals. You really want to get out of this domain of like, here's my goal. You want to be like, what are the systems that I can continually show up for on a regular basis that can guarantee some level of success? How do you get yourself more access to luck more often? And so vagus nerve stimulation, there is an aspect of luck. So, I could certainly say try Wim Hof breathing. And some people, it works for them on the very first time. I remember the first time I did Wim Hof. I was at a Tony Robbins event in San Jose in 2016, I think, and I had another very profound experience like that on day one. But people sitting around me, I'm sure, were like, that was just breathing. That was like BS. I think because of my training with breath work and jujitsu, that I was more primed to be able to hold my breath and to push my body to an extreme without being so concerned that I was gonna do some harm. I've been choked out with my gi. I've had my own gi, my own collar, my neck, and I've lost consciousness. So I wasn't afraid. So for someone who's like brand new to the world of the vagus nerve, I would just say like, you know, being healthy in general is the best way. You want to look at like there's certainly an additive aspect. Like you can start adding more things onto your health to encourage your vagus nerve to work, but there's also an aspect of removing bad things. And I can tell you there's two clear cut, like the kind of science has shown that there are two really clear cut things that do the some of the most damage to your vagus nerve. The two, as far as a habit from a systems perspective, is overeating and especially eating junk food. And I'll tell you why in a second. But the second one is drinking too much alcohol. And arguably, any amount of alcohol can start the process of demyelination of the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve, if you protect your vagus nerve, you'll live for a long time. You'll be happy. You don't want to be at the age of 40, 50, 60, waking up to the fact that your vagus nerve has been absolutely destroyed by your lifestyle. So finding things to remove is probably just as important today as what you add on. I could give you a ton of things. Honestly, I would just say for anybody watching, just Google how to stimulate my vagus nerve. You're going to find things like humming and gargling and deep breathing and ice cold showers. I'm not going to give you anything new. The main thing I could give you that's new is, there are devices, there are tools. We're all into wellness, there's handheld stimulators you can hold up to your neck and stimulate your vagus nerve like I did. There are things you can buy commercially. There are things you can clip to your ear to stimulate. I just got off a call advising a company doing PTSD treatment with a in-ear vagus nerve stimulation that uses ultrasound. It's fucking amazing. So that's the kind of stuff that's coming.
What?
But
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
badass.
So it's very badass. So there's a lot that's coming, but again, it's like systems over goals here. this can take time. You know, even if you're measuring your HRV, like maybe your HRV is low, like my HRV is 17 milliseconds every night. I want it to be at 100, like some super athlete. That's where you should induct, like a athletic marathon runner, probably going to have an HRV that's light years ahead of yours. That's not something that you can change overnight. You know, no pills or magic pills or anything like that is going to fix that. It just takes time. You got to train this nerve. So it's a long haul thing. All I want to say to people watching is the vagus nerve is probably the most rewarding rabbit hole as far as health that you can go into. It covers everything. I'm right now, some of the work I'm doing, besides, you know, the basic, like stimulate your vagus nerve, that's easy. I'm looking at now is the concept of ideology and how mass movements are actually we so the concept generally of ideology, right? People like joining a collective group and like behaving in mass psychosis, these kinds of things. You'll notice that they typically keep people in line by how they feel. So there's a level of adherence. I would also recommend the book Reality Transurfing. I'm giving you this stuff because I know this is the fam. This is the jiu-jitsu people. I would not give this on an Oprah interview, by the way. So you guys are really lucky.
Well,
But what
thanks.
I would say,
That's a great book. That's a great
yeah,
book.
Reality Transurfing, Chapter 2, Pendulums. You'll understand so much of what's going on today. But the vagus nerve connects to this, and it's the unhooked connecting point to that work on ideology, which is that what keeps you as an adherent for so long is that you feel things like shame or guilt for trying to leave, trying to escape the mindset or the collective. And guess what? When you have a gut feeling, that's your vagus nerve. We've now mapped those feelings of instinct, of like fear, primal fear, or love or joy or yearning or desire. These states are viscerally connected to the vagus nerve. So there's 100% a connection between ideology, symbolic consciousness, and then the vagus nerve. And so the weaker the vagus nerve, the more you are likely to be into ideology because it serves a need. But I won't go into that too much. If you want to have a follow-up with me, that's fine. But
That's wild, man.
it
That's
goes
wild.
deep. I think
I would love
it's on a
to.
big level, very, very important work
I would
do
love to
that.
do a follow up and
Yeah,
dive deep on like just that topic because I feel like that's an hour at least right there what you
totally.
just spelled out at
Yes.
least. But dude, so do you have time for one more question though?
Absolutely. I got 10 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, let's dive into this, man. So I'm on the autism spectrum, and there's
Mm.
a lot of people in the audience I know either on the spectrum or they have family members on the spectrum or friends or someone. And so something that I've learned about autism is, and I'm not an expert in the vagus nerve. That's why I wanted to have you on the show. But to ask this question, what I have heard in my amateur research is that they're finding the mysterious they who are figuring these things
The
out,
big other.
they are finding that that autism is somehow linked to a disorder of the vagus nerve, and they think that that might be the mysterious long sought after cause, quote unquote, because a lot of times people are like, we don't know what causes autism, it might be this, it might be that, and now allegedly people are finding that could be vagus nerve related. So do you believe, like, are you hearing this too, or is this all nonsense that I'm hearing? Like, what's your take on this? And I guess more broadly, like, do you think that a lot of mental health conditions could be tied to what we're learning about the nervous system and the vagus nerve?
Definitely. I would say what ties things together is probably inflammation. Inflammation of tissue, where the inflammation is happening seems to determine symptoms. So, for instance, in the work we do with vagus nerve stimulation, you typically see, okay, so let's take an example from basically the most invasive form of VNS that you can do, vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, is an implant you can get. It's about a $16,000 surgery. And they took a pacemaker, a heart pacemaker, the one that Dick Cheney has. But they took the leads, the electrical wires, up to the vagus nerve in the neck. So there are right now 300,000 human beings walking around. You might not even know them. It's completely under the skin. that have a stimulator that's electrically stimulating their vagus nerve every 3 minutes. And the conditions for which that is approved for are things like depression, epilepsy. Now they're looking at rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inflammatory condition of your joints, Crohn's disease, which is an inflammation condition of your entire gastrointestinal tract. And these things work exceptionally well. So if we're finding that chronically stimulating the vagus nerve, meaning just stimulating it very continuously, making sure that it stays at a high level, doesn't drop out, and we're seeing the complete cessation and remission from severe autoimmune conditions, no more inflammation in the body after just a few weeks, then we can certainly say that there's a connection between the vagus nerve and inflammation. And then furthermore, I do know that there are people with autism, people who are on the spectrum, especially parents of children with autism, are resorting to things that are vagus nerve stimulation related, usually through electrical stimulation through the ear. That's the typical route that a parent might go. Anybody who is watching, if you want to research this guy who kind of pioneered this, is Dr. Nemechek, Nemechek, Dr. Nemechek. He's based out of Arizona in the US, but he has lots of resources. They provide, as part of their practice to children, a small clip that goes on your ear. Your vagus nerve also runs down your neck for sure, but it also runs up into your ear. That's usually why, as sort of a sensual thing or a nice relaxing practice, people might rub a feather on the ear or massage the ear. It has a calming effect. That's the function of the vagus nerve. So yeah, so autism is most likely, from my best guess, is a condition of inflammation in the brain as one thing. So it causes like hypersensitivity, hyperactivity in neurons who feel like they're under some kind of a threat. It makes you, autism can be expressed in a number of ways. So it's not me to say like it's all just that, but there's definitely, a connection.
That's crazy. So just to summarize the long and short of what I just heard, again, I'm trying to do like you're the pro. I'm going to now try to take what you said and pretend I'm like an 8-year-old and try to regurgitate. So in other words, what you're saying is that you can use electricity to stimulate the vagus, I almost called it the nagus verb, the vagus nerve, the vagus nerve. So you can stimulate the vagus nerve with electricity is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy. So
yeah.
are humans, so this leads to a broader philosophical question that we won't be able to knock out in 5 minutes, but I'm going to end on this. Are humans machines? Like, are we robots secretly? Is that the big secret here? Because if we can be stimulated and powered on electricity to some degree, could there an argument be made there to take this into complete left field? What's your gut reaction? To that
my gut
question?
reaction is no. I don't think that humans are machines. Humans are influenceable, and keep in mind my background that even got me in here. This field was looking at brain stimulation first, so going through the skull, stimulating structures in the brain with sometimes electricity, but our primary stimulatory methodology is ultrasound. Same kind of ultrasound you would use in imaging. Right. So ultrasound sends small pulses like sonar into the body, and some of it's reflected back. That's how you get an image. It's sonar, like a submarine uses sonar back and forth. But the reason why you can see an image is because some of the ultrasound comes back, and that's reflected as a light, increase in light on the screen. But some of the ultrasound doesn't come back, which means that there's an empty space. And some of that energy is actually transferred into stimulation of neurons. So ultrasound as sound can stimulate neurons in the brain. Yeah. And there's some amazing stuff. I can't get into that for sure, but there is definitely some awesome work in that field. That would be another conversation to have for sure. But you can stimulate the body, you can stimulate the brain. Don't get too excited about electrical stimulation. There are so many limitations to it. If let's take Neuralink. So let's look at Elon Musk's company Neuralink, right? Kind of the preeminent popular culturization there are so many limitations to that. Um, it's
Yeah.
it's not it's not going to be doing as much as you think. You're not going to be like, you're not going to be streaming visual movies into the brain and feeling like
Yeah.
you're like the example they give is, a wife goes on a hike, she streams her visual cortex right to her husband's eyes who's still at home, he experiences it. There's so many funny things that we could talk about. So let's say, just as a
Yeah.
last little thing, if the audience isn't too young, but let's say that there were somebody who were using it for sexual experience, which is one thing that Elon Musk specifically has said in talks, which is, what if someone wanted to relive a sexual experience? They could look at the Neuralink and replay their favorite sexual experience. So that's an example of what they're proposing. What if the person was a sadist? What if they got joy out of masochistically torturing their victim? But then what if they uploaded what if their victim had a Neuralink in their head and they were streaming the victim's subconscious or subjective experience back into their own brain as the masochist? You start to get into these very interesting dialectical questions of what is really capable. And the fact of the matter is that it's so much more limited than you think. And the core thing is really, the core thing to leave you with is that Elon Musk thinks that language, that words, is the limitation. He always talks about, we want to get rid of the thumbs. We want to stream direct conscious thought. All that you are, in essence, is the thought. There's nothing past the words. There is stream of consciousness, but the book, The Obstacle is the Way. The words are the obstacle, but they are the way. So what you say, what you speak, what you think in your mind is of your own free will, and you have so much more power than you think. So don't let yourself get discouraged by all these machines and all these technologies. There's so much more in the human soul and spirit that can be awakened. And so I don't want people to lose sight of that. So that'd be my closing message.
Boom. That was a mic drop. Sterling, thank you, brother, for coming on the show. Tell us where people can find you before you leave. Tell us where people can find you.
Probably Twitter. I'm trying to grow my audience on Twitter. You can just go find me, Sterling Cooley, twitter.com/Sterling Cooley. I go post a lot of irreverent stuff there that could probably get me canceled, but fuck it. It's owned by Elon Musk now. So
hell yeah.
And then you can find everything else from there. That's what
all right, brother. Well, hey, check out the links below. And Sterling, I'll see you next time, man.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Take care.